cross-country analytic methods. He combines expertise in sustainable economic development and public policy with private sector experience in early stage investment and operational improvement. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I will now hand over the floor to Dr. Ice. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. We're very honored today to have quite a distinguished panel discuss the topic of green growth innovation. As everyone will know, innovation is seen very much as at the heart of the green growth transformation, a transformation which really requires a move from well-established and well-worn technology pathways to an entirely new set of technologies and technological pathways. Now, on the stage with me today, we have quite a diverse set of experiences represented from large national programs and international development efforts through to entrepreneurs on the ground in some of the lower income countries. I think we have a panel that really represents the diversity of challenges that are required to really push forward green growth innovation. And I hope today, by bringing them all together, we'll have a bit of a sense of how this can all be put together into a cohesive picture that leads the way forward for what will certainly be a challenging opportunity. We're going to start the panel with a lead speech from Dr. Chang Mong-sung, who is the president of the Green Technology Center in Korea, a government institution which is designing and coordinating green growth innovation policies across ministries and agencies. Dr. Sung, may I invite you please to begin our speech.
Good morning, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to present the role of green technologies for developing countries. I believe today's keywords are technology and innovation. So let me start with this map of right here. Yeah, map of innovation. Probably you see how come my country is too large or too small. Well, as you see here, the United States is #1 in innovation. According to Dr. John Kao, who was a professor at Harvard, he published this paper in Harvard Business Review. And you see Israel and also Finland is #2. Just I show you this innovation map because we are going to deal with this innovation and technology today. And then let me show you this map here. Showing different regions with different colors. Korea is about 7th in ranking. So our development was really based upon this kind of innovation. Well, if you look at the Korea right here, it's very, very small compared to previous map. That means we had concentrated on innovation last 40 years. Okay, let me show you this picture. Actually, satellite picture at night. As you see, innovation comes here between North Korea and South Korea. Obviously, North Korea didn't put a lot of innovation in energy technology. Probably they put more effort on defense technologies in innovation. Well, so there's a big divide between this North Korea and South Korea. And then let me show you with this picture taken right after Korean War, 1950. So if you look at this Capitol here, Capitol building, it almost all destroyed with the very poor people on front. And then I'd like you to look at the mountain indicated by yellow arrow. And then same mountain is right here after 60 years in Seoul, same area. So this is development of Seoul and also Korea through innovation. And then if you look at this mountain very carefully, just below the mountain there is the Blue House. Probably you could see the Blue House later. Let me just show you real best practices in green growth in Korea. Ulsan city was the original city for industrial revolution in Korean history. As you see, Ulsan city was farming and also a fishing area. And then if you look at this Taehwa River again, before the Industrial Revolution, and then it was transformed into this city, like here. It's not a picture, it's a real, it's not a drawing, it's a real picture in Ulsan. So I like to talk about the best practices of green growth through Ulsan case, and then I'd like to discuss some other technical innovations with you. Well, Ulsan had a lot of so-called brown technologies in the beginning, like heavy industry, shipbuildings, automobiles, petrochemical technologies. And it was really farming country, farming areas. And then the same area was transformed into like this, petroleum factory and shipbuildings. So at the time, we didn't care environment at all until 1990 or 2000. And then we begin to learn that we have to take care of the environment. So, green growth comes here. And then, as you see, Ulsan area had a lot of densely located small and medium enterprises, high energy consumptions, and it was a major source of environmental pollution. So we got to do something for solving these kind of issues. So we started so-called EIP, Eco-Industrial Project, which shows, well, actually the objectives are reusing resources and energies. Also, we try to get zero emission done in this area. Also, we have to work with the community very closely to make sure a win-win situation. Also, it has to be sustainable. So this is just one example. There are two companies like Hanguk Paper and also Korea Zinc Company. Korea Zinc Company had a lot of leftovers of steams and also CO2s. So they had to throw away all those materials. And then this Hanguk Paper was able to get these kind of leftovers for their own use. So they had the MOU, and then they were able to save a lot of CO2 and also steams. Also, as you know, a lot of bio or mass stuff here from animal manure and the food trash. So they were able to using all these trashes for the industries. And actually, this kind of project was started in 2005 with SK Chemicals and actually KICOX, KICOX. They started, this government institution started this kind of project with a few companies. Actually, I was working at the Ulsan Corporation for 5 years as a president CTO. We were involved in this project too in 2008. So as you see, Ulsan and right here, it's not working. Ulsan plant and other plants are working together with the SK Energy, and then we are sharing our resources, actually leftovers. And then we got very interesting result. And then you see here, many companies are getting involved. So right here, so all these companies are connected together. Oops. With this kind of gases, heat, steams, and CO2s, and so on. And then the outcome is to see so-called the steam highway. So we have about 6.8 kilometers in Ulsan area right here from satellite view. So this was very well-known success stories. And then this is statistics out of this project. About 21 companies were providing materials to 23 companies, and then we were able to save about $600 million, US dollars, and also we reduced a lot of CO2 emissions. So this was a very interesting project in terms of green growth. And then this is statistics from 2007 till 2012. So this was published in UN report, and then many countries are interested in this kind of project recently. So as a result, the Ulsan was very poor and farming city before. Now it became richest city in Korea. So it has 54,000 US dollars in GNI, richest city, with 1.1 million people with this kind of green growth. So they are very happy. And also we continue to work on this project since 2005. So phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 will be done by next year, and then we'll evaluate this project again. Then we'll continue this project until the phase 3 is done. And this is development of Korean industries, for example. From 1960, we had only 60-something industrial complexes. And as you see, once we have different technologies and industries, we begin to develop more and more industrial complexes. And now we have almost 1,000 industrial complexes. So this is our driving force for industrial revolution. So this is a summary of our development from 1960s and 70s and 1990s and 21st centuries. So you see the development of this curve, and then you can see this curve with this so-called trading volume. So we achieved $1 trillion in trading 2011. And also, as you see, our GNI is continuously increasing. Well, we still have a lot of issues and problems, but this is the, our growth due to innovation, technology innovation in Korea. Well, what's the driving force of this innovation in Korea? I would say definitely people. So first of all, 1966. At the time, we had only $150 in GNI. Very, very poor. We were about third poorest country in the world. But former President Park set up this KIST to develop our industrial revolution. So we invited 18 people from abroad and then started this KIST in Korea. So this institute was the real resource for development of Korean innovation. And then let me summarize Korean science and technology development with this table. We try to imitate everything from foreign countries. In 1960s and 70s, also we had to sell everything from Korea, like even speed, coals and everything. And then we tried to catch up in 1980s. And then we begin to innovate our technologies as time goes on. So luckily, we were able to achieve this kind of development right now. And now we are dealing with the new issues, new challenges. So we have so-called the creative economy, as Dr. Yang said just before. So this is a summary of our development plan. Last 20, 30 years, we had about 5 economic development plan here, so just for your information. So finally, at the end, we were able to export everything from our industries. Because as you know, we do not have much resources, natural resources in Korea. Only human capital and knowledge and hard working. And now we have to work very intelligently. And then it's interesting to see Green Revolution concept by President Park. He wrote this writing saying that the Green Revolution achieved in 1977. At the time, Korea was very hungry. We had a lot of, we were a very hungry nation. And then Professor Her and President Park developed this new kind of rice. And then we became kind of non-hungry nation. So we call this is Green Revolution. Also, okay. And then the other thing is so-called the 새마을 운동. So it's a split of 새마을 운동. As you see, the green flag. So this kind of farming countries were able to develop their own villages through this kind of a spirit movement. So here, let me just point out what's the 새마을 spirit. First of all, we try to turn our adversity into opportunity. And then mindset change is very, very important in innovation. So nothing should be given free. You have to earn everything through hard work. Also, we try to build basic infrastructures out of farming countries. And then now, President M.B. Lee declared green growth, low carbon green growth in 2008. So we had about 60-year brown technologies. Now we have green growth strategy and performance. So we had about 27 green technologies and raised about 1,200 enterprises with a $2.7 billion R&D budget from the government. And then we try to commercialize green technologies for global market and also educate a lot of people and set up new enterprises. And just last year, we have them reclassified into 18 green technologies for commercialization. So we continue to work on this project. And then we invested about $3 billion to renewable energies in these areas. Let me just skip a few slides. But here, as a result, we became the 5th in these clean technologies in the world from 8th. And then we were one of the manufacturing front runners in renewable energies in Korea. Then, once we achieved this kind of technology innovation, then we begin to work with developing countries through ODA. As you know, we were ODA recipient about 20, 30 years ago, but now we begin to do donor country. Then luckily, we hosted GCF, so now we have finance and technology and strategy. So I'd like to show you some examples in GTC last year. So we've been working with developing countries and also developed countries like here, in Vietnam and other countries. And with Vietnam, we worked on capacity building workshop with the GGGI. Also in UAE, we had a workshop last year, also on capacity building methodologies. And then I went to Qatar. We discussed these metrics on renewable energy plan and water desalination and farms. And I introduced this kind of isolated energy module through wind power and also solar cell with the desalination unit in Jeju Island. Also, we introduced this plant factory to Qatar, and then luckily last month they had MOU with Gyeonggi province on this plant factory to have them installed in Qatar. Well, this kind of work has been done. Also, just last month we worked with 11 UNDP regional officers. We invited 11 government officers from countries, Asian Pacific countries. We tried to set up a knowledge sharing system. Now in Korea, we got together to work on this kind of knowledge sharing system to the transfer technologies and others. Well, we are very much interested in CTCN in terms of technology needs and capacity building programs. And I borrowed this slide from CTCN website. We like to participate in this scheme for technology transfer and transformation together. Well, just the last part, probably you are wondering what's going on in this new government. As you know, the daughter, as you see, the daughter behind the President Park in his inauguration in 1962, now she is current president. She is claiming, he declared a creative economy. Well, let's see. Well, this is written in Korean, but I brought it purposely, on purpose, because this is a two national agenda given by current government. Number one, unification of Korea from small to large unification through, let's say, with the DMZ and green detente and so on. And then you see the English right here, developing countries. That means we continue to work on developing countries for technology transfer. Also, GTC is supposed to work with the GGGI and GCF for developing countries. And then just last week, President Park Geun-hye, invited so-called World Friends Korea global volunteers, young volunteers to the Blue House. They are from KOICA program, so we'll continue this kind of a green ODA. Also, the Semaul Undong is now Green Semaul Undong in Korea. So as you see, this green Semaul Undong is being spread to other countries like Cambodia and also African countries. So now we have so-called green spirit, green technology, green finance, green strategies. So just I'd like to point out this kind of new trends in Korea. Finally, GTC is going to work together to establish a global network with developing countries. So we like to bridge the gaps between generations and developing and developed countries, and also R&D and the commercialization. Well, still we have in Korea a lot of issues and problems, challenges, because we used to be a fast follower, but now we have to be a first mover, just like a Samsung Galaxy S4. That was real first mover, they say. Well, so this is our challenge, and then at last, I hope we could continue this green creative economy, and also I wish you could create your own country in this map with a very, very large map. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Changmo, for that very interesting presentation about the experience that Korea has had and its vision for the future. And before I open up the panel discussion, let me introduce the other panelists on the stage with me today, starting with Kevin Urama, who is the Executive Director of the African Technology Policy Studies Network. I then have Nate Hultman, who is a fellow at the Global Economy and Development Program of the Brookings Institution, as well as Director of the Environmental Policy Program at the University of Maryland. Next to Nate, I have Harish Hande, who is a social entrepreneur and are you the CEO? Is that the right way to? The CEO of Solar Electric Light Company of India, founded in 1995. To my left, I have Peter Haas, the founder and executive director of Applied Infrastructure Development Group. To his left, we have Nawal Al-Hosani, who is the director of sustainability at Masdar, as well as the director of the Zayed Future Energy Prize. And of course, Changmo at the end, who I've already introduced. Let me begin with you, Kevin. We've just had a very interesting overview of the experience of Korea over the last few decades and now moving forward. And I think one of the interesting things is that Korea, as Changmo was mentioning, went through quite a catch-up phase in its innovation development and its economic development. And what's been striking is how quickly it sort of caught up and began to become a leader. After having done most of the catch-up, it's now leading, in a sense, or trying to lead in the green growth innovation space. Now, for Africa, in a way, given the green growth transformation, the need is to both catch up and lead, because the new development pathway, in a way, requires not just doing what was done in the past, but innovating in a completely new way, in a way that countries like Korea have the luxury to do from a more advanced development perspective. So I'm wondering, given your perspective on innovation and innovation policy in Africa, what's going to be required to take on this double challenge of sort of technology catch-up, but also leadership to make sure that such a transformation is possible?
Okay, thank you very much. It's really interesting to listen again in person to the amazing history of Korea's innovation system and how it's grown from imitation to leading in green innovations globally. In Africa, we really need to learn from history. Innovation history clearly shows that for market-driven systems like global green growth innovations is happening now, that still you find that the institutional structures for markets to function are fundamental for these things to happen. Innovation does not happen in a vacuum. It needs an ecosystem. And that national ecosystem is not really existing very much in many African countries at the moment. And the second point I would like to draw on is the focus of leadership on innovation as a national priority. He kept mentioning Korea started over 40 years now, has been focusing on innovation as its development agenda. The development priorities in Africa and in many less developing countries, less income countries now, is not innovation or green growth. It's actually innovating for poverty alleviation. And at that level, you are seeing a lot of movement in social bottom-up innovations happening, addressing different issues relating to poverty. Some of them also intuitively addressing issues of green growth. So having that focus on green growth innovations is a very critical issue. And the more compelling factor is actually capacity. The capacity to innovate, the capacity to receive technologies and use them, and also the capacity to govern technologies and the whole system and complex structures that are involved in managing national innovation systems to have them to thrive and continue to move forward. So I'd like to just summarize some of the issues that needs to be addressed for the African continent and many other developing countries to move forward. One is building that national system of innovation, building capacity for basic education. University R&D systems are not really well functioning in many African countries, and that needs to be addressed in moving forward. Then the different context variables in terms of the governance structures, the types of institutions that are necessary for foreign direct investments, for attracting innovators and entrepreneurs to thrive. All these are still fundamental issues that needs to be looked into. Now, needless talking about finance, because that's really a very fundamental aspect on how to leverage private and public finance for helping innovation to happen within the continent. And then above all, leadership and political will. It has kept coming up in all the discussions we have had here, and we can see how the political will and leadership within Korea has helped to drive the people to start focusing on innovation and moving innovation forward. So for the African continent, the global community has a lot of responsibility, a moral responsibility, and also implicit advantage in trying to leverage huge opportunities in productivity and efficiency gains that are still existing within that continent by helping to build capacity. If capacity is built and governance begins to change and focus on innovation and green innovation, Africa will catch up with Korea and maybe even overtake them. And I can say that from the experience of the past 10 years, where African countries are actually fast growing in many different areas, but focusing largely on poverty alleviation, employment creation, and the fundamental growth questions that are still needing to be addressed before the framework conditions for green innovations becomes pertinent in that continent.
Very good. You raise a number of important questions about the underpinnings of all of this innovation. What is it that creates the fertile ground so that this type of innovation can begin? And I like the way you framed it in terms of a national innovation system and with a strong basis of capacity building, and then the other enabling support, including financing. Let me turn to you, Peter. From the experience on the ground in a situation that's not dissimilar from what the challenges are in Africa, what do you see by way of the requirements? Have you seen the kind of challenges in terms of capacity, in terms of financing, and what would be some of the ways that you found to overcome those and to start to see innovation taking root?
Well, I think that, is my mic on? Sorry. I think there's a disconnect right now between the investment community for green growth and the entrepreneurs who are seeking investment for green growth. And I'll give an example from a pitch event that I was recently at in DC. There was an Indian company called Damascus Fortune, which had a technology that would take CO2 emissions and convert that into carbon fiber for construction and vehicles and golf clubs and whatever you want to use carbon fiber for. Possibly a game changer in climate change. And this company was seeking roughly $1.5 million investment at that pitch event. Around the same time, from the tech space, I was reading stories of a dog housing application, mobile app for dogs, that raised $7 million in a day to build their mobile app for dogs. So on one hand, we have a valuation in the tech space where we can say something that's a mobile app for dogs is worth $7 million easily. Yet in the green growth space for developing countries, a possibly game-changing technology is struggling to raise $1.5 million. And I think there's a reason for this. And the reason is a reason of exits. I was at an investment meeting at the Clinton Global Initiative a couple years ago, and a group of international investors were asked who in the room has made international investments in the past 4 years. And pretty much everyone's hands went up. Then they're asked who has had a successful exit from that investment. 2 hands went up in the room. And I think that this is a major concern for early stage investors, seed stage investors, who are trying to support these entrepreneurs, is how am I going to get my exit back in markets that don't have established stock markets or established valuations for companies to be able to get a clear exit. So I think that there are a lot of challenges that are there on the financing side that need policy to help resolve them, to make an environment and an ecosystem that's friendlier to entrepreneurs, to be able to raise the capital they need to be able to grow their ventures and make impact.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much for highlighting I think the critical point that faces the entrepreneurs themselves in the field. I mean, how is it that you actually get off the ground? It's very nice to talk about the need for transformation, but at the end of the day, there's people who have to make these transformations real. I think, Harish, I'll turn to you in a way as a successful entrepreneur. You know, taking into account the challenges that Peter's discussed, and I'm sure there are ones similar to you. Could you tell us a little bit about what it is that helped you succeed? What were the conditions required so that you were able to get to where Selco's got, which is, I think, about 500,000, is that right now, users of the technology in India. And on top of that, what would it take to be 10 times bigger? Because I think 500,000 users is very successful by the standards we have today, but by the standards, let's say, of what we'd like to see in the future, I'm sure you strive for more.
No, thanks. Thanks. I think, Peter, you gave an idea. We should actually do a cross-subsidization. Let's make a dog app for 8 million and 2 million for energy services out of that. People will never know what the valuation is. No, but you're right. See that too. I mean, one is it's a completely a patience game. It's a patience game in a sense that you cannot. This is not a quarterly results or a 3-year exit strategy game at all. Zero, zip. Secondly, the needs of the poor. We are blanketing the poor in the world as a monolithic structure with models of Starbucks and Walmarts and McDonald's being overimposed on these issues. The needs of the poor have not been mapped out. That means the solutions of the poor, needs in terms of technology, finance, business models for the 4 billion people has really not been mapped out. And that ecosystem that has not been created, and that's not been taught in the modern day MBA schools, and I tell some of the youngsters is that the fortunate part for me when I started 18 years ago that we didn't have the internet, so you had to go and learn in the field. And today with the internet, you actually go and Google and learn what's there on the field. And so I think it's about spending enormous amount of time, not couple of weeks, but years in the field to look at what the needs are, what are the business models, what are the financial challenges, and what are the financial models. And then create a business model that is at the doorstep of individual user, business. And then how do you have investors who have also gone through the same cycle and are able to structure the debt and equity according to my needs. And for me, I mean, I hats off to my colleagues who have actually made the business. And these are the guys who don't do Excel sheet, Word, or PowerPoint presentations. They don't know, and these are the guys who actually know what the poor need. Mm-hmm. And the guys who do give the money only to PowerPoint, Excel sheets, and Word. And so the big disconnect between these two worlds. Mm-hmm. And I think that needs to be broken if investments in the real sense needs to happen for the 70%. And I think then is what, I mean, a simple thing. I mean, you're never taught what a potato vendor needs. I mean, how many of us actually know a potato vendor will never buy a yellow light? Why does she buy a white light? A simple question in MBA school they're not able to answer. Or a tomato vendor will never buy a white light, always buys a yellow light. These are stuff you need to understand to actually bring a business model, and that gap is missing.
So let me just follow up then quickly with that. Why is it, and where are we going to get this sort of this cadre, this army of people in the field that we require to kind of come up with and uncover some of these real user needs? You know, why isn't it there today? Is it, I mean, what's stopping people from sort of going out there? What's needed to get more people out there?
It's because we've also made clean technology elitistic in many ways. And business of doing clean, as you're doing too good and it's become elitistic, we are not going into the rural institutions of many of these countries, directly investing into the rural institutes of these who have, because you look at institutes that have been responsible for creating rural entrepreneurs, like the IT, the root cities or the technical institutes in rural India, or you talk about in Africa, directly enhancing them both in terms of infrastructure, finance. At that, you always have it in capital cities. You're not going beyond capital cities. You're not creating entrepreneurs at that level or enterprises. What you're doing is enhancing skills for them to become employees. You're not enhancing skill to become employers. I think how do we break the barriers in the middle of we educated classes around the world? We have become the middlemen. And I think we need to, our layer has to disappear and the investments has to directly go into, and that's the barrier. It's the same question for me as a frustration. 1994 is the same question when we used to be in conferences. It's 2013, it's the same question. Right, and I think we need to break that. We need to disappear.
Very interesting. Now, let me turn to you. It's a very different perspective, I think, that Masdar and the UAE offer, but many of the same challenges, I think, in terms of how do you go from, in a way, very rapid, almost 0 to 60 in a very short time in Masdar, saying, we're starting with very little by way of sustainability, sustainable innovation, through to an enormous effort that requires the skills, the entrepreneurs, all the capabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about how Masdar was designed and how it's sort of overcome the challenges of getting the skills and capabilities, bringing in the entrepreneurs to drive new ideas? Yeah, go ahead.
I think the first step was the leadership. The UAE government had a tremendous leadership into taking this very, very bold, very brave step in establishing Masdar Initiative. Masdar Initiative is very unique in a sense that I think it's the only initiative in the world that handles sustainable development and renewable energy specifically in a holistic way. Saying that means that we look at it not only from a technology point of view, but from the different elements. So from a research and development all the way to commercial deployment. And to do that, Masdar has been structured in a very unique way. So at the core of Masdar, you have Masdar Institute of Science and Technology. And because building human capacity is very important, preparing people for new employment is very important, and developing such skills is very important. So Masdar Institute was developed in partnership with MIT to do just that. The other thing that Masdar Institute is doing a lot of research in the areas that is very, maybe a bit local, for local challenges, but for global implications. So we look at water challenges, we look at food security, we look at energy security and renewable energy, and hence Masdar Institute is tackling different research points, but with one aim is basically to address such challenges. Then we have Masdar Clean Power. Masdar Clean Power basically looking into scaling up renewable energy and providing investment for renewable energy on a large scale to improve the renewable energy percentage and to facilitate the scaling of renewable energy. And we have been extremely successful in doing just that. And we didn't do that alone. And that's, again, The approach that Masdar and the UAE has been always taking is we partner with international, in a small scale and a larger scale. So if we're speaking about larger scale, like London Array, for example, we partnered with companies like E.ON and Dong. Shams One was in partnership with Total and Bengua. So you bring the international big players and bring them into your own kind of context and learn and develop and evolve and bring your investment in partnership with them. On a smaller scale, in addressing energy access, as part of our commitment to the sustainable energy for all, working with countries like in Africa. Just last month, we integrated in Mauritania a 50 megawatt PV plant. That's basically 10% of Mauritania's grid capacity. With this plant, not only we brought energy access, but we created a lot of job opportunities because most of the procurement for that project was locally done. And the plant now is being operated locally. So there is a lot of opportunities that was created from that. Next week, we are integrating in Seychelles wind farm. And with that wind farm, again, providing clean energy access at the same time, creating job opportunities. Moving to investment, finance, you need to, this industry needs a lot of funding, and that's why we created Masdar Capital. Again, bringing funds, global funds, and partnering with the global players to bring funding to clean technology and sustainable development internationally and locally. Then we have Masdar City. And Masdar City is a benchmark for sustainable development, and this is where you have your clean tech cluster. You create, you incubate, you bring different players, and you provide this environment, this ecosystem for them to to create and innovate. And again, bringing international players, international companies, but encourage local small companies as well to be part of this incubation kind of system. And to do that, we are now working with Abu Dhabi Khalifa Fund, which is a fund for entrepreneurship, to bring those entrepreneurs who would like to be working in the clean technology or the clean or the renewable energy industry, and bring them to Masdar and expose them to other players who has been doing this for years and years, and having in Masdar City, at the heart of Masdar City, Masdar Institute, at the same time our other technology leaders like Siemens, like GE, all these big players, and next to them you have these small medium enterprises that can be part of their supply chain and part of their evolvement chain. Then you have these platforms like this. Masdar has, since the beginning, created Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, started that World Future Energy Summit, and now it's growing to be an Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. And you provide this large platform, but at the same time you have these small venues where you can connect entrepreneurs with investors, you have the government leaders, but at the same time you have the private sector sitting around the same table, understanding each one of, basically voicing their concerns, understanding their challenges, while the governments will have the responsibility to provide the right infrastructure and incentivize and minimize the risk of the private sector. The private sector also needs to become a bit more responsible and bring some of their, take some risk themselves as well. So providing this platform, which is extremely rare to have around the same table, the investors, the private sector, the government, and the civil societies, and in the World Future Energy Summit and with Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, we have been trying to do that. The other thing that managed by Masdar as well, but it's an initiative by Abu Dhabi government, which we created, which is the Zayed Future Energy Prize. So Zayed Future Energy Prize is a different thing. With the Zayed Future Energy Prize, what we're trying to do is to recognize, award, and honor those who actually made it through in this sector. So they have had a very clear leadership, a very measurable impact on the industry, the innovation, very important, and the long-term vision. And it's an annual prize, and we award it on a total of $4 million. So there is a recognition award for large corporation, 1.5 million for small medium enterprise, 1.5 million for non-profit and government organization, and $500,000 for lifetime achievers. So lifetime achievement is basically that individual who has been leading in his or her own way to mobilize the industry. And again, engaging with the youth is very important, and education is very important. So since 2012, we launched a new category, which is global high schools. And for the global high schools, it's basically very different. We still look at the same criteria: leadership, innovation, impact, and long-term vision, but we look at it from a future point of view. So it's a promise. So we look at the school to deliver a promise of a project that addresses one of the sustainable energy for all initiatives, which is renewable energy, energy access, and energy efficiency. And if a school brings a project for funding, then they will be eligible for up to $100,000. And to provide kind of equal opportunities for schools around the world, the prize is categorized into 5 geographic regions: Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. And each basically region, a school would be awarded for up to $100,000. So as you mentioned, it is not one thing, it's a system. You need to have a full system to enable and basically to accelerate the industry, in a positive way and in a sustainable way, because you don't want it is not about short-term solution. Green growth is part of a long-term strategy for sustainable development, and there are different parts to this. Basically, a very challenging opportunity.
Very, very interesting. I think, Kevin, if I go back to you, because I think Nawal, in a way similar to Changmo, but obviously a very different context, has laid out a sort of comprehensive approach, all the way from understanding the capacity building through to financing and reaching out. Certainly you can't. If anything, you can't fault Masdar for not having thought through from end to end what would be required for quite an ambitious effort. And I guess my question, in a way, in an African context, I mean, certainly the UAE has resources at its disposal, but it's a small country in a way, and there's no necessary reason why certainly the large countries in Africa, like Nigeria or South Africa, couldn't put together a decent amount of resources to focus on this if it were to become a priority. I wonder, what would be your Is there a way to bridge the gap in a way? Is there a way to go from where we think a lot of the African countries sit, which is very lower developed national innovation systems, a really big starting point, to some of the much more comprehensive approaches? So is there a way of bridge that gap? And what would you say are the sort of steps to bridge that gap in your mind?
Okay. The one thing to mention actually is that Africa is not a homogeneous entity. Yeah. There are different experiences depending on the different levels of development. We just heard yesterday about South Africa in terms of its green energy investments and so on. And also you have countries like Ethiopia that we have already also celebrated as having that visionary leadership, that just like what we had here and what we have here in South Korea by Meles Zenawi, leading on climate change and green growth frameworks for the continent. And currently, the Africa Development Bank is actually working on its own green growth strategy for the continent. The same thing with the African Union Commission. So we're seeing a lot of movements and interesting developments from different angles within the continent. But then in the more general, the law of average, then you find that the issues of poverty and the problems that I raised still persist. But that's not to say that Africa 20 years ago is the same thing as Africa today. Africa 10 years ago is very different from Africa today. And we're seeing a lot of reforms happening, a lot of governance infrastructure being put in place. And courtesy of that, we're seeing also a lot of growth in different areas. She just spoke about supporting youths, and also I would mention women. At my organization, we work with the Africa Youth Forum for Science and Technology and Africa Women Forum for Science and Technology, and it's amazing to see the amounts of green innovations that are actually coming out from these people, the youths and women, addressing rural problems, what they call social innovations. They're really small-scale innovations, but can be scaled up, like we've seen happening in India. But the problem there is that the policy environment is not just right to help these innovators to thrive. So we find very brilliant innovations, very promising ones for upscaling, but then the financial structures, the systems, and so on just crowds them out of the market. And what you find then is for very few of them that are lucky to have an international investor gets knowledge of, to become aware of what's going on, then you can see some success cases like the green banking innovation. I mean, the mobile banking innovation that came out of Kenya, and different disaster risk reduction innovations with Shahidi. There are so many different kinds of innovations coming out. But having these national systems of innovation is really very critical, and we find the only countries in Africa that have a semblance of what one would call a national systems of innovation is South Africa. Nigeria is just developing its own, Egypt, and to some extent Ethiopia. And these are the countries where you are seeing things happening. And that's why I keep going back to that issue of forming that basic structure, because without that basic structure, we're not going to see the scale and rapid innovations that are required to address green growth and the urgent needs of climate change. And now, the other issue is that for most less developed countries, including Africa, the global attention has always been on technology transfer. And that comes from what my colleague from India is saying, the elite groups. We pretend we know the problems, we have the solutions, let's develop it and sell it to them. So Africa remains a market for consuming technologies, and that simply continues to lead to knowledge dependence and poverty, technology dependence, and living responsibilities and continued responsibilities for the global community to sustain that huge 1 billion people that are within that continent. And what we are seeing then is loss of great opportunities for efficiency gains. In the energy sector, the energy intensity of growth in Africa is like twice that of the rest of the world. So we have a lot of greening that can be done, even in the brown economy, if only the capacity, the technologies, and the endogenous skills to govern these technologies can be built within that continent. So it's a huge opportunity waiting to happen.
Great. It's very inspiring to see, I think, the thinking and the movement. As you say, Africa isn't what it was 10 or 20 years ago, and there are leaders now emerging. Nate, let me ask you a question. One of the things that's, I think, been coming out, and both Jangmo and Nawal mentioned quite a lot of international cooperation, bringing together resources, skills, to some degree technologies from overseas, but we've also heard, and I think it's probably the case if we look at Korea and Masdar and UAE in more depth, we've also heard that there's a need to do that in an appropriate way, to make sure that international cooperation doesn't lead to this elitism of technology, but leads to actually technologies that address what are the user needs and the specific pathways required for the countries at stake. What could a better international cooperation system look like to start bridging this gap?
That's a great question. And when looking at international policy for innovation, I think it's very important up front to frame it in a certain way. And that's to amplify actually 2 points at least that have been made by my fellow panelists earlier in the session. So first of all, domestic policy is really the focus here. And I want to echo the national systems of innovation, the national strategic vision, and the national governance structure are really the kind of fundamentals of fostering that sort of entrepreneurial culture and fostering the innovative environment that we want to see. But that said, there are some limitations. In particular, when we're talking about green growth innovation, we're talking about innovation in an area that often doesn't have as much of a market payoff as dog technology, where people actually are willing to spend money on something. In green growth, we'll often talk about low carbon technology or something that has a broader benefit that we want to encourage societally for some other reasons. The green reason, maybe it's a nationally based green reason, a global community. And so we have to remember that there is a sort of additional value to these technologies that isn't being captured by the entrepreneurs or the individuals within the country. And that's, of course, why we're all sitting here today, to try to think about how we can do that. The problem that we're dealing with is that innovation policy is always very difficult, as some people have mentioned, from the top down to kind of impose. It's, Dr. Sung mentioned this concept of, I've lost it in my notes here, Seimal Ungdom. So don't take, this should be a natural sort of spontaneous generation. But from the international community, we could have something to offer as well, and that's to essentially add this additional value that might not be generated from the actual market that people are looking at the ground level. So there's a couple of areas that international policy can contribute to, and since I know we're limited on time, I'm just going to mention there's a report that I've done with my colleagues at Brookings and also with Jason and the people at the Green Growth Institute on this topic, and I can refer everybody to that for more detail. But in brief, there's a few areas that international policy does potentially effectively address. This is the cultivating the science and technology and innovative capacity within a country. You can ask the question, how can the international community contribute to that from the outside in cooperation or in partnership with the national government? The second piece is fostering the existing entrepreneurial culture in the countries, not necessarily imposing or not necessarily thinking about technology transfer, but recognizing that as we look at sort of the history of innovations globally, it's often the case that the most transformational innovations come from unexpected places. They come from places that surprise us. And what we want to do is ensure that the people that are not in the capital cities, that are sort of thinking about their markets, they know their markets, that they have access to the capital, they have access to the financiers that they need to. And the question is there a role for the international community in that process, and what might it be? And finally, a topic that's familiar and I know will be talked about later in the day, which is thinking about finance and de-risking of investments. So I'm not going to talk at length about that. So very briefly, we looked at a number of international approaches to doing this, and I'm going to recommend 5 very briefly, and you can look at the report if you want more. But first of all, thinking about a program to catalyze the innovation ecosystem, and this is something that's come up in almost all of the interventions thus far. Thinking about innovation capacity catalyst funds, dedicated funding, looking at increasing the flexibility within the ecosystem, sort of tying that together at the national level. So there might be a role for new funding from the international community to go in and top up, as it were. Second, to look at sponsored networks of business incubators. Now, a lot of these incubators are happening spontaneously in the national context, and I can't name all of them, but certainly we have focused efforts here in Korea. We've heard about Masdar. There are other ones in Brazil. There are ones in India. But thinking about networks between these incubators and how the best practice of the incubators can be done might be something that could benefit other countries that haven't gone to that step yet and might be thinking about business incubators for green technology. Because it's not easy to set up a business incubator, as I'm sure some of my colleagues here can attest. It requires a great deal of effort and also thoughtful construction of the incubators to how to make sure that the financing does in fact meet the people who are looking for it. So that's a second area. A third area is looking at scaling up innovation. And how to do this? Well, thinking about competitive grants that are merit-based that might be funded from an international pool, maybe a regional science foundation, maybe something along those lines, maybe a prize like the Zayed prize that we've heard about already. So something that provides an incentive that could be funded externally, but that would go on a merit basis to the entrepreneurs, to the innovators in different national contexts. That's a third possibility. Fourth possibility, which we've seen some effort on, is large demonstration projects, thinking about sort of demonstration of concept. Actually, Masdar is another example of this to some degree, looking at the low-carbon city that they've constructed. Songdo might be another example of this, looking at a big sort of demonstration of how to integrate the various pieces, some of which may not have been naturally integrated just by the market alone. So thinking about a demonstration project with, again, maybe some external funding could be key in getting that to work. And finally, looking at dedicated funding for de-risking investments. And that could be loans, first loss funds, patent pools, risk guarantees, equity. There's a whole series of possibilities there that I won't go into great detail on. So Jason, that's what I would say is a sort of, when we've looked at the possibilities of what's worked and what's worked well, what the need is currently, and what honestly hasn't worked well in the past, that's a few areas that we might look at in more depth to see if we can get it going.
I think it's an interesting perspective, and I think one of the key elements that's come out of work that's been done over the last decade or so is what you started off with, which is that international cooperation only works well when there's domestic the ability of the domestic entrepreneurial system or innovation system to actually handle and absorb it, right? Otherwise, there's no way that it ever gets channeled through. And it's an interesting array of things that you laid out. I guess the other gap then that I'd love to explore in a little bit more detail is this, in a way, this gap between the kind of the government's perspective on here's what we could fund and the international support for that, and again, getting back to sort of, I'm the entrepreneur in the ground and this is what I need to do. So let me start with you, Peter. If you put yourself, having heard what you've heard, if you put yourself in the position, let's say, of the government, which I think on one hand is really required to the degree that makes the point, this is an area that to some degree has additional benefits outside the typical economic benefits. Innovation always requires some level of government support because it's so early stage. If you put yourself in the position of the government that wants to help, but that has to come up with sort of pragmatic ways to get its money out to the world, what would you recommend as sort of the 2 or 3 key elements, the key programs perhaps, or the key ways of distributing funding that you think would be most effective?
The 2 areas that I think would have the greatest impact were already just mentioned, I think. And that would be supportive incubator ecosystems and de-risking investment. Those are 2 areas where you can have significant impact for very little money. And you can leverage external funding to be able to grow your impact. And the incubators are very important because most of the entrepreneurs who are coming up with new innovations are at stages where they're not ready per se to take investment, especially when you're talking about the rural entrepreneurs who are great at knowing the local market, but not necessarily great at knowing basics of business practice. And they need support from programs like incubators to be able to help get them ready to take investment to be able to grow their business. So incubators, very important. And then guarantee funds, ways of trying to ensure that investment isn't lost will help spur international investors who are concerned about risk and who are concerned about exits in their investments in investing in those incubator funds. A final area that I think could use support is actually technology transfer in first-to-follow methodologies. So we did an investment in a business in Haiti that does stoves that was able to get their stove from Toyota Energy in Ghana. And because they were able to get a pre-established stove with a pre-established business model with a factory production plan, they were able to get up and running in only a few months and actually start producing thousands of units to get out into the community instead of wasting a year and a half on their research and development of a new stove and their plan for building out their factory. So I think that if you can encourage application of technologies that have had existing proof of scale in new markets, that's another great way to encourage green growth.
And how did that, just an interesting case, how did that work? How did it happen? How did they identify that stove in another country?
That was the work of the entrepreneur directly, identifying that stove as something which had scaled in another country and developing the relationships to be able to get that intellectual property. Fortunately, it was a stove that had a basis in open source design, so there wasn't a complicated licensing agreement around it. Right. But it was really the innovation of the entrepreneur to do that.
Very interesting. Changmo, on that note, around the ability to, and the methods for really leveraging technologies and advanced technologies that perhaps have been developed elsewhere in the world. And I mean, let's be honest, for many countries, even though you'll want to adapt technologies, a lot of the core technical elements will come from countries that have been doing this for decades. So in terms of how do you make technologies that are sort of advanced and suitable, let's say, for a Korean context, how do you make those available in a way that can be, A, intellectual property-wise, easy to absorb, I guess, and B, essentially adaptable. You mentioned open-sourced kind of development technology. What do you think from your perspective?
Very good question.
Yeah.
Well, we've been through last 40 years to develop technologies, but I like to see the development of technology in Africa, for example, within 20 years, rather than 40 years, right? Because we had a lot of try and errors, and then you learn the lesson, right? Actually, I like your idea about the SBIR concept internationally. That's what I'm understanding. But I'm not sure if it's going to work, but there is a big assumption that the technology moves from the high level to low level naturally. So we have to know that, for example, we went through $10,000 GNI and $20,000 GNI. We had to throw away all the technologies. Those spillover technologies do not have any patents, no IPs at all. And then, for example, I was working at Ulsan Group. Now, the company is #1 in textile. It's a spandex textile company in area. And we moved our technologies. Actually, we learned, Ulsan Group learned the technologies from Germany and US about 40 years ago, 1970. And now, we cannot take that technology in Korea anymore. So we have to move it around. So first of all, China, then Vietnam, then Turkey, now Brazil. The reason, what I'm saying, the reason is that the technology moves. So each country has its own environmental issues or capability. So each country could take different technologies. Here I'm talking about only manufacturing technologies. Or we have also ICT or biotech and others. I'm talking about manufacturing technologies. So if we have some funding, I'd like to use that funding to move technologies from developed country to developing countries naturally. And then they will be able to make money with the technology after some time because they have a very low cost labor and also they will have a market, for example, in Africa. So, but they talking about just the technology transfer, but I don't think that's going to work internationally, especially between developing countries and developed countries and developing countries. Because tech transfer is being used among only industries, or private sectors. So they are talking about money because they invested a lot of money in R&D. So they have to make a profit out of IPs. So I'd like to start with so-called medium technologies or spillover technologies internationally, and then have a kind of a test bed in Africa or in Asia Pacific countries, and then make a kind of a good model. And then, for example, United States could transfer some ICT technologies to other countries with, for example, GCF fund. So I hope to see that kind of successful model.
Forget you raise an interesting point, which we haven't really discussed too much today, which is the sort of the transfer of technology vis-a-vis, in a way, multinational companies in terms of spreading their supply chain across a number of countries, and as a result, bringing technology to different countries, perhaps at a level appropriate to their skills base. I wonder, Harish, it's quite a different way of thinking of technology transfer. Is it part of the elitism that you mentioned, or is it complementary to the kind of efforts that you've done, which are a little bit more bottom-up, grassroots, locally based?
See, I have different view on technology per se is a very small part of the game. I would like the business models to be open source. Technology, it's a question of how do we replicate the business models? How do you replicate the processes in each business model, for example, right? If the same question that you talked to Peter, as a government, I should look at what are the successful processes, not even business models, Like suppose a business has succeeded by create a guarantee fund, how do I scale up the guarantee fund in all the banks? Okay. If a particular business model has succeeded in cracking the code with 10,000 cobblers, how do I replicate it in elsewhere? And today we are talking of scale up of companies. I think we should talk about scale up of processes, so that other companies and other ecosystems actually flourish. So that's why in terms of technology transfer, it's never played a major role, for example. It's about business models. And today, for example, the little bit danger of just looking at technology from that point of view is, if you look at Africa, many of the technologies are developed according to how the financial products of the microfinance industry are structured, not what the needs of the poor are.
Yeah.
Right, it's okay, this is the financial product that a microfinance gives. Does my technology match the outflow of the MFI, not what the poor need? So that's why forcing the poor to become regular consumers rather than asset creators. So I think that's the danger of having just purely thinking of technology. It's the day would come when you actually, in a room there's a technology guy, there's a finance guy, there's a business model guy, and the client. And that's when the ecosystem gets developed. Today we all are very familiar with Apple or anywhere technology where you're talking to another potential Apple users. How many of the stove technology guys are actually sitting with the stove user? It's always again, so that's why I think there's a big gap between the guys. If you look at all the stove manufacturers in the world, and I put everybody in this room, are mostly men who have never cooked. How would you develop it? And that's something that I think I would still break it down. It would still need to be broken down.
I mean, in a way, you get to one of the challenges of innovation. I mean, you get to the fundamental element of innovation in general, which is it's not something you can plan top down. It's not something you can overly structure. It's something that has to come from this real engagement of needs. I mean, it's always been build a better mousetrap, right? And it's not because someone who didn't have mice in their house thought that it was nice to have a better mousetrap. It's because people had mice running around and they needed mousetraps, right? But so I guess the reason I say that in terms of this fundamental problem of innovation is it feels like from the conversation a lot of the instruments that governments are using today may just be simply inadequate, right? I mean, they may be or they may not be effectively enough challenged, I guess. Channeled, I guess.
If I was a government, then I would put in a room 10, 15 top practitioners who have succeeded over an period of time. Stakeholders like the financial institutions have financed the end users of these practitioners. The investors who have invested in these practitioners, all in one room. What has that made it successful in this combination? Can I take those processes? If the practitioners has been succeeded in getting employees from the local training institutes, how do I scale that process of technical institute? If the investor has invested and says that my IRR was not 15% but 5%, where did the delta 10% get lost? Can I do that viability gap funding in some other way where I can actually encourage more investors to actually invest? The bankers are saying, what is stopping you from getting more end users to be financed? Okay, they're saying not many enterprises are there in other parts of the country. How do I encourage these enterprises to scale up or replicate? How do I create an incubator? So the whole ecosystem has to be in one room. Now, practitioners are always in the audience, never on the side of the policy. I think we need to shift that where practitioners start calling the shots.
Yeah. Well, let me turn back to you, Nawal, in a sense. I think when you mentioned the sort of the perspective that's been created in Masdar, which as you pointed out in a conversation before this, is actually a private corporation. It sounds like you've got quite a large element of the ecosystem in one room, metaphorically speaking. What have you? I guess maybe elaborate on how that's worked. Have you managed to draw? Do you feel that Masdar has managed to draw together a large portion of the ecosystem in one place, and is it led to success, or what have been the challenges from your perspective?
Well, it's going to be different challenges to the different pillars of Masdar initiative. So if we are going to talk about, for example, Masdar Capital, you will have, investing in the clean technology industry hasn't been a smooth sail, as you mentioned. There are many, the industry faces a lot of challenges. Like you have companies like, Solendra and the similar that hasn't been done very well, and hence our investment hasn't done very well as well. But on the other side, it's fine, because you will have other companies that has been growing rapidly, and the return on investment on this organization has been much higher. If we talk about Masdar City, a lot of the theories that we started with when we were designing and building the city hasn't been proven right, and hence we had to go back and revise our strategy and go back to the drawing board in many of our concepts. Just to give you an example of such challenges is, we said the city is going to be self-sufficient from water and energy, and depending that we are going to basically use our groundwater. But when we first tested the groundwater at the location, it was hypersaline. And for us to use that water, it's going to be not sustainable in different dimensions. Like, talking about commercial, it's going to be very expensive. And we're going to use a lot of resources energy-wise to, pre-treat this water and then desalinate it. It is a much better option for us to connect to Abu Dhabi grid for the water. However, what we did is we started piloting renewable energy and solar energy desalination platforms across the UAE and in Masdar. And there is a water-focused research theme in Masdar Institute. So we use these challenges and opportunities to find solutions to a bigger problem, not only to the UAE, but globally. If we're going to talk about investment in large-scale renewable energy, there is a lot of uncertainty on, for example, the feed-in tariff in some of well-established markets. But again, there is a new market is being born in Africa. You have, South Africa has been phenomenal in how much, they are trying to move on with the renewable energy in South Africa and many other countries. Japan now is a big opportunity. What's happening in China is, again, encouraging, because there is a will to increase the portion of renewable energy globally. So there is, it's kind of, it's not all doom and gloom. Mm-hmm. There is a big opportunities, and again, every challenge and everything that goes wrong basically is an opportunity for us to see how we can make it right. And we keep on telling whoever joins Masdar, we keep on telling them, you guys are not building a city, you guys are building a book of knowledge, because this is not something that is done every day, and it's not something that's been done before. So there is so much there to learn, and so much there to research on. But there are some very successful stories on how you incorporated some of, we always, being an architect background, we studied the environmental theories and how can you have an environmental conscious design, and how you can use the environmental factors to be part of your city's ecosystem. But you don't actually see that in practice except in Masdar City, because this is where all these theories has been put in place in the development of this city, and you see it working. You walk around the city and you see how pleasant it is. The differences in ambient temperature in the streets of Masdar City is much lower than Abu Dhabi business as usual. So you see this happening. One of the many challenges as well, going back to Masdar City, was the supply chain. When Masdar City was trying to get built, the market had almost no sustainable materials, and whatever was there was extremely expensive. So we had to create a market, because Masdar didn't want to, basically, as a private entity, it would have been very difficult for us to, unjustifiable that we pay the price for a premium price, because basically a supplier is having a monopoly in a certain product. So what we did is, in partnership with our stakeholders in the government, we created this market. We had a partnership with different developers in Abu Dhabi, and we brought different suppliers to the room, and we told them, you guys either basically pick up the game and be part of this movement, because there is a movement. It is happening. Abu Dhabi and the UAE is moving into sustainable construction. And you guys have to be part of the game to be able to join this train. And I can easily say it is working. We started with one supplier for certified wood when Masdar was being built, and now we have multiples. And we started with only Masdar city speaking sustainable design, and we have now in Abu Dhabi a mandatory building rating system for all buildings, government and private. So it has been a very, very rapid growth, not very easy, not very smooth ride, but on the other side, the results of this challenges and obstacles has been a change, a positive change for the industry and a recognition regionally and internationally.
Great, you raise a number of important points, and I'm going to open it up to the audience now for a few questions. I do like the way you termed this sort of book of knowledge, and it links a little bit to the point of whether there is the ability to use demonstrations or large demonstrations in certain countries as a book of knowledge for the global community. And I also think it brings out this idea of perhaps there's a role for, I don't know how to precisely put it, but for orchestration by the government without overdetermination of what goes on, and that's probably what we're, in a way, terming the innovation system, is getting that orchestration right. But I want to leave time for the audience members to ask a number of questions. We still officially have about 6 or 7 minutes, but we might be able to go over by a few minutes if there's quite a lot of interest. So do we have a microphone that's roving around? I've got one hand already up in the front, and then one to the side. Is there there we go. Great. Let's start with yeah. And please introduce yourself quickly and then ask the question.
Thanks, Jason. Check. Thanks, Jason. I'm Arunabha Ghosh, Council on Energy, Environment and Water in India. First of all, thanks to all the panelists for their insightful remarks. I think I wanted to go back to one of the first issues that came up, which is, and I think it was Peter that mentioned it, is about exit, etc. I think the challenge with when we're talking about low carbon or green growth, innovation, etc., is that we have to think about how investors approach it. Normally, the approach is that we try and identify the company, the particular entrepreneur, etc., and then try and invest in that entity. So you're always looking for the big success story. You're always looking for the headlines that the New York Times will report on. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of what we are talking about is the ecosystem. Now, an ecosystem is hard to define, it's hard to identify, but I guess the easiest way to say what an ecosystem is, the best performing ecosystem is one that you don't notice because it is so well performing. It's when you say that the financing has to happen or something else has to happen, you know there are bits and pieces that are missing. So the question back to the panelists is, how do we go back to the investors, the people with the cash, and say, stop betting on individual companies. Stop thinking that everything is the next Facebook or the next Apple or the next Google, and talk about innovation ecosystems in green growth. Unless you can get investors thinking along those lines, you're always going to end up with Solyndras. You're always going to end up with the guy who can't get the $1.5 million in equity investments. So the harder question back to the panel. Thanks.
Very good. Why don't we take just 2 or 3 questions and then we'll go around. There's one more question over to the left. Maybe we'll start with just 2 questions if you over-egg it. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Nina Horstman. I'm with APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. I'd like to thank the panel. I just have a quick question. So following last year's Vladivostok Declaration, APEC has created a new body, a policy partnership on science, technology, and innovation. And as we're tackling now the challenge of establishing our common mission and our work plan, we're finding that a lot of our member economies, while they have made this commitment to regional cooperation on promoting innovation, are still concerned with retaining the benefits or the values of any proprietary technologies domestically before any international technology transfer. So I guess I'd like to hear the panel's thoughts, especially Dr. Urama, on the logistics of creating an enabling environment for innovation across a region, especially a region at different stages of development, considering this sort of national interest. Right. Thank you.
Okay, great. Two very tough and big questions, I think, to start off with. I don't even know. so many panelists. Why don't I start with Kevin on both questions. First about how do we create an understanding not of picking specific entrepreneurs, but actually getting investors involved and thinking about it as a full innovation ecosystem, so that you're creating the kind of plethora of opportunities that might be required, the sort of thousands of flowers that you'll need to really make it work, as opposed to a cylindra or two.
I think that's a $1 billion or even $1 trillion question, especially when you're talking about green growth. Because of the public good characteristics of most of these green growth investments. So if you really want to create an innovation ecosystem, I still think that the global community, the governance systems, has a lot to do in order to create that, not the private investor. Because the returns to creating an ecosystem that works accrues largely to the public, not to the private investor. The investor is interested in profit. And getting the investor to think differently within a market structure to then start creating a culture of innovation for countries is maybe, Nawal may explain a little bit how they have managed to do this. But from my little economics, I don't think that's really very feasible proposition to go forward with. Now, investors prefer to go with success stories because they want returns on investment. And the returns on investment on green innovations are not really very juicy at the moment. So increasing the risk of not getting good returns on investment by broadening the attention of the innovator is a bit challenging. Now, but for the governance systems, engaging the innovators and the investors in designing the policies and the innovation structures within their countries to ensure investor confidence and so on is a way of de-risking investment and creating better perspectives by the investors in the system. So that's the first way I would try to address that question. Now, the other one on how, basically similar, how to create basically the innovation ecosystem within countries in order to happen. That's very simply ambitious environmental policies and leadership. We need leaders who can be able to prioritize innovation and start building that kind of culture within the countries. And now international cooperation for innovation is a very challenging one. I carefully try to avoid the issues of trade rules and intellectual property rights and how that helps or impedes innovation in climate change adaptation, mitigation, and green innovation, because it's a very huge and contested field. And I don't think we can be able to address that completely within this. But from the perspective of the African countries that I've been working with, they actually see some of these as great impediments to building their confidence in participating in the green global value chains, because there's always that feeling of that these particular types of rules has negative implications for people at the bottom of the pyramid if your competitiveness advantage is not that very high. And that is playing out in the climate technology transfer arena as we see it at the moment, where technology transfers between the South, the global South, is very low. And technology transfers from between the ODA, OECD countries is very high. And that simply is because the competitiveness advantages and the macroeconomic structures, the political economies within these countries are very favorable for FDI flows and trade sharing and so on. So it's really like asking in a jungle an elephant, a lion, and a rat to sit together and cooperate.
Why don't I turn to you, Peter, if you have any perspectives on the questions that were asked?
Yeah, I believe that the best way to deal with the investors not moving forward is to follow the hardware industry in the US for consumer hardware. Early stage consumer hardware right now is not going to investors. You take the case of the watch that I'm wearing, it's called a Pebble, and they went seeking for investment and failed completely. So they put their watch on Kickstarter and went to crowdfunding, and they raised $10 million. And my friends over at Ushahidi have done a similar thing with a wireless modem for the African market called the BRIC, where they went to investors and they decided, we should go to crowdfunding first. So I think that crowdfunding is actually going to level the playing field for a lot of these early stage entrepreneurs in getting out to the point where they can actually be established enough to talk to investors.
Yeah, please, sir.
See, I think also we need to remove the whole, the romanticism in terms of, because the BOP market is defined as something, there's a $5 trillion market at the bottom of the pyramid, which is itself a very wrong notion of looking at that, because it's a non-expendable income. You never look at $5 trillion non-expendable income as a market. And we're telling that $37 billion market in the off-grid space of people spending on kerosene, that's a $37 billion market. If they keep spending $37 billion from kerosene to renewable energy, they'll still remain poor. The question is not a market. How do we implement system, they spend half of that, and the rest 17 or 20 billion goes into asset creation for them. And that is how do you leap. Not like keep taking that 37 billion every year, that the poor remain poor and you've created consumers. I think that is where the investors are, that's a market. I think that redefinition how the investors need to look at, how do we move the philanthropists from not destroying the market? They come to the center, and how the unrealistic expectations, like somebody said 20% IRR is realistic. But if 20% are realistic, why the world of 7 billion people, there are only 1 billion people that are in that category? So who has created this number 20%? I think both have to move to the center. And how do we create both to the center is, I think, where examples of Nawal and Kevin would actually come in. And that's where people need to listen to. And that expectations of 15 to 20% is unrealistic, socially unsustainable, which is more dangerous than financial sustainability.
Thank you. There's a much longer conversation, I think, to be had about the right financing models for innovation to make sure that, as you say, that IRR expectations are realistic but are still commercializable in a way. It's a fascinating topic. I don't know if we've done justice to the second question. I'm going to give one more shot to Changmo. No, we're going to give it. I think it's time for lunch then. I want to thank all of my panelists for their participation here and for our very patient audience through this panel session. I think we're now ready for lunch, and I'm going to, I guess, hand over to the main moderator.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give Dr. Jason Ice and our panelists another big round of applause for what was a very lively and interesting discussion. It is time for lunch. As I mentioned before, during lunch, we're going to have a special speech by Professor Jørgen Randers from Norway. For the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to be distributing the lunch boxes. And after the lunch boxes have been distributed, we will invite Professor Randers to the stage for his special address. After his speech from 1 o'clock to 1:30, we're going to have a coffee break. After the coffee break, we'll break out into 3 parallel sessions and then meet again at 3 o'clock for the closing plenary session. So I will be back in a few minutes with our special guest. Thank you.